Welcome to our webinar. We're thrilled that you joined us today from wherever you are. We're here in Tampa, Florida, and this is the second in a series of webinars that we're doing to give you an insider's look into behind the scenes at Shriners Children's. We want to show you how we do things, what we do, and why we do those things, and then also how we're different from others. Today's topic is about our international programs, when we bring children from other parts of the world to our care, be that care in the US or care in other places around the world. I'm joined today by Lars Kozlowski, who is our Executive Director of International Strategy, and Laura's going to take us on a tour of our international programs. Shriners was founded over a century ago to bring care to children who were suffering at the time from polio. We've grown over time to now serve over 1.5 million patients and families over that 100-year period of time. So before we start, we wanted to share with you a great video that kind of gives you a behind-the-scenes tour of Shriners. Let's cue that video.
We are the children that you champion every day, helping more kids in more places, and providing the most amazing care anywhere. These are more than just words. This is the mission you live by. This is Shriners Children's.
For the past 100 years, Shriners Children's has been on a mission to help those who need it most, children. And today, that mission is reaching more children in more places through our ever-expanding model of care. Telehealth is helping us expand the border of our neighborhoods to help children in almost any town in America. And when an in-person experience is especially needed, we're bringing the children who need us most to the doctors and nurses who care the most. Last year alone, children from more than 100 countries experienced firsthand that the most amazing care anywhere translates into any language and unites us all. And when the children can't come to us, we go to them. With hospitals based in the US, Canada, and Mexico, we're also growing our clinical presence throughout Latin America and beyond. At a moment's notice, our healthcare professionals can be activated to assist burn patients from around the world, while our sustained impact occurs through physician outreach and teaching partnerships. Children around the world are discovering that when we say provide the most amazing care anywhere, it's not just an aspiration, it's our promise. It takes more than doctors, nurses, and the latest technology to expand this care to where it's needed most. It takes the support of caring people just like you. So thank you for joining us now and into the future to make sure every child can experience this care for themselves and every family can find hope and healing for their child.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. Today we're going to give you more information about those international programs that were referred to in the video, but we want to hear from you as well. So if you have questions, please type those into the chat function on the screen, and then we'll get to as many of those questions later in the program as possible. So Laura, when we think about the history of international programs and the growth of that over time, what does that look like, and how have we grown from 1922 in one location to today providing care literally all over the world?
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to share about the international program that we have here at Shriners Children's. One of the things I did want to show you is, as you know, most of our hospitals are here in the United States, and the majority of the care we provide to international patients is in the United States. And you see we also treat kids in Canada and Mexico. This is what our hospital in Canada looked like when it was founded in 1925. And as you mentioned, the focus was children suffering from the polio pandemic. Here I wanted you to see what do we look like today in Montreal. So this is a picture of a building that we moved into less than 10 years ago. And we've tried to make the inside as child-friendly as possible for the kids. And then how are we growing in Canada? So you can see in the little box, that's where our hospital is located. We're trying to reach kids coast to coast in Canada, and in particularly remote rural areas where they don't have access to the specialists that we have. And we do that through telehealth and outreach. And all of our locations across Canada are through collaborations with existing healthcare organizations. Our goal is always to complement the care that a patient might be getting close to where they live, and then provide that expertise that we can provide. Mexico, as you know, we have a hospital in Mexico City. It's about 80 years old. And this is a picture of what it looked like back in 1945. And here is an outside picture of the building today. And this is one of my favorite pictures of what does the hospital look like inside. Thanks to a wonderful donor, they have donated little motorized cars that are controlled by the nurse. And this is what the kids drive in to go to the operating room. So rather than being afraid of surgery, they're all clamoring for, when do I get to drive the car? So I thought this was a cute picture of a cute child to show you what we do there. So what do we look like around the world? So every year, 4,000 to 4,500 kids from many, many countries, as Stuart said, hundreds of countries, come to the United States, Canada, and Mexico for care that they otherwise can't get in their home country. So here's a map of the top 20 markets, or the top 20 countries that the children come from. Darkest blue is the largest volume of patients, and then down to the green is getting to be a smaller number. And you'll see a lot of our patients come from the Americas, which makes sense due to proximity, but we also have some really well-established relationships in Europe, the Middle East, the Pacific Rim area. And we'll share some stories about that with you a little bit later. So here's what the Americas looks like. So our top 20 countries in the Americas pretty much follow the presence of the Shriners Fraternal Organization in the region. And you'll see kids come from all over the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and Mexico, and of course Canada. And we're doing our best to reach those kids as well as we can.
So Laura, when we think about the great vision that the Shriners who founded us had, it was to provide care for children regardless of their ability to pay. And we still are true to that mission today. So when we think about many of these patients that are coming to us from other countries, they're coming from poverty, they're coming from impoverished areas, they're coming from rural areas, and many of them are not even used to traveling. Right. How do they get from where they live to where we are?
And that's a great question. We help kids from all over the world, many of whom have never been in a bus, let alone a plane, or any other ways of getting to the United States. So I want to just show you real quickly a pie chart. Why do they come to us, first of all? So about 70% of the kids who come to Shriners Children's for care come for orthopedic conditions and orthopedic surgeries. But the next largest is burns. And I have a couple examples to share with you all to really show that journey of the kids. But I did want to emphasize that this takes a lot of support for the families. Many kids don't have birth certificates. They weren't born in a hospital. They weren't born with a healthcare provider around. Many, as you might imagine, don't speak English, Spanish, French, Portuguese. We get a lot of kids from indigenous communities. Say in Mexico, we just had a child come in and the family did not speak Spanish. And so we look for interpreters. And what happens is they work with foundations and fraternity members to first of all find us. And then those people in country help them get passports. They help them get visas. They help them figure out how to get from their front door to an airport, how to board a plane. And then we meet them on the other side. Many times fraternal members in the country that the patient's going to have surgery in will meet them at the airport with big signs and smiles on their faces and bottles of water, and they take them all the way there. So I wanted to just share a quick story about Carolina. You saw a little bit about her in the intro video. Carolina's from Ukraine. In this picture, she's 6 years old, and you see she's missing her legs. And this is a picture of her with her sponsor, who brought her here to the US, and we just have a short video about her we wanted to share.
Good job, sweetie.
Both of 6-year-old Carolina's legs were amputated at the knee, and the likelihood of finding the right prosthetics in Ukraine was not good. But then her family reconnected with a woman they met across the border.
Був такий гуртожиток для українців, де по польській програмі безкоштовно надавали житло і прихисток українцям. І я працювала там.
Shriners Hospital for Children has treated half a dozen Ukrainian children since the war started, among thousands of international patients, many with complicated prosthetic cases.
I'll never forget when we put on the check socket, she stood up and took off right away. And I don't think in all my years at the Shrine I've had a bilateral patient jump up as quickly as she has and take off.
10 seconds!
Нас вона одразу стала на протези і просто пішла. І вона подивилась на мене, я заплакала, вона ж теж почала трохи плакати, а потім посміхатися. Я їй сказала, я плачу від щастя, а ти? А вона каже, я також.
Carolina was discharged in March after 6 weeks of therapy and relearning how to move.
Так, на Україні є небезпечно, але вона не відчуває хвилювання. Вона як дитина, вона ще не розуміє ситуацію на Україні, я думаю.
So you asked, how do these children get to us? So Carolina was from a part of Ukraine, or is from a part of Ukraine that's, I wouldn't say it's rural, but it's far from the major cities. The mom had never traveled internationally. Her stepdad had never traveled. They had never been on a plane. And so Carolina, we were able to help through the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C. President and Mrs. Zelensky's foundation actually sponsored their transportation and their housing to come to us. And it was a first time for everybody, and it worked out really, really well. As you saw a picture in the initial video, a Ukrainian church in Boston sent parishioners to the airport to greet them so that they would feel welcome, and then our Boston team was able to really, bring them in and make them feel welcome. Juan Diego is another example that I wanted to share with you. He's an example of one of our patients who's been burned and needed to leave his country, Honduras, to come to us for the care that he needed. And I wanted to explain a little bit about how do children with burns get to us. As you might imagine, they're typically in very serious condition. And so their first stop in their care journey is always a local hospital. They get there obviously by calling 911 or whatever the local emergency number is. And then we're contacted by the treating physicians who either contact us directly or they may call Shriners in Country, and we all work together as a group sharing medical information to make sure that their air ambulance journey to us at one of our burns hospitals in the United States, we have 4, their journey is safe and it happens as quickly as they can. And so you'll see Juan Diego's journey resulted in him flying from Tegucigalpa, Honduras, all the way to Boston. It's expensive. As you might imagine, that air ambulance trip is usually somewhere between $30,000 and $45,000, depending on the services the patient needs. And so we're very lucky. We find sponsors who pay for every single one of those air ambulances. Sometimes those sponsors are members of our fraternal organization. Other times it's foundations, and other times it's generous donors, because the children have to get to us as quickly as they can. And it's really wonderful how that works.
So we're going to hear more directly from Juan Diego later in the program because we have a great video to show you detailing his journey and detailing his story. Laura, when we talk about the regardless of the ability to pay and getting patients here to be treated by us, part of what we're trying to do also is to take that treatment closer to them. Could you talk a little bit about the expansion that's underway and also that we have planned in Central and South America?
Perfect. I'm happy to. So I showed you a little bit earlier a map of Canada, and it reflected, all those dots reflected the efforts that we're undertaking to expand coast to coast in Canada. We have similar initiatives in Mexico and farther south into Latin America or South America and Central America. This is a picture of what we look like now in Mexico. Our main hospital is in Mexico City, which, as you can see, is in the southern central part of Mexico. And in the past 10 years, we added what we call a clinic in Tijuana and another one in Monterrey. So what does a clinic mean? A clinic to us is we provide the expertise. We locate inside a very high quality hospital that has already built out operating rooms, inpatient rooms, and all of the services that you need. We're able to scale up very quickly because what we have is our clinic facility. and the specialists. We hire the pediatric orthopedic specialists, the nurses, and the social workers, and we're able to do things very quickly. Time frame to build a hospital is many years. The time frame to set up a clinic is much shorter. So we're able to help the kids closer to where they live as quickly as possible. It's very efficient. It's also very cost effective because we leverage the abilities of our collaboration partners when we need them, and otherwise we don't have to cover those expenses. This is what the map's going to look like in a year. We're adding 3 additional locations in Mexico, and you can see they're spread out to reach more areas of the country where there are kids in need. And we're looking at Culiacan, Sinaloa. We're establishing in Guadalajara, which is the 2nd largest city in Mexico, and also in Chihuahua City. And all of the hospitals we're collaborating with have excellent reputations. They're all accredited locally in Mexico to the quality standards that they need to be. And it's just a wonderful way for us to grow. Let's look at the region again. So the table to the right shows you the top 20 markets. For those of you looking at that, you'll see Puerto Rico. Yes, we know it's not a country. It's a Commonwealth of the United States, but it is a very important market for us. And so we're trying to expand, again, to the markets where most of our children are currently coming from. So in Puerto Rico, we have had relationships for over 40 years with all of our service offerings for burns, for craniofacial care, and for pediatric orthopedics. So we've resumed outreach, which had to shut down for a little while due to COVID. And with our craniofacial program, we actually do surgeries and procedures on island, working in collaboration with the local shrine temple and a wonderful foundation in Puerto Rico. And you can see by locating in Puerto Rico, if you see all those stars, we're able to help kids very easily from the Dominican Republic and Haiti. It's a 20-30 minute flight from the Dominican Republic over to San Juan. Brazil, we're initiating outreach and market assessment. Brazil is a very long flight from the United States and Mexico, so we really would like to be able to help kids closer to where they live by keeping them in Brazil. So we've initiated a market assessment to find collaboration partners in Brazil that we can work with to take care of the kids locally. Bolivia, Ecuador, and Peru are long-standing relationships as well for outreach. And we have a burns collaboration in Peru where we've shared best practices on infrastructure and care and protocols. I'm going to pop up real quickly to Honduras and Guatemala. In Honduras and Guatemala, we have historically had outreach and assessments. And in our Mexico City hospital, we have a wonderful pediatric orthopedic fellowship program. And we have graduates of that fellowship program in Honduras and Guatemala. So we have ongoing telehealth relationships, and then they're able to follow up with the patients post-surgery or pre-surgery, and it's very, very helpful. I wanted to share real quickly about Panama. We just launched an orthotics and prosthetics care program, in Panama. This was us 2 weeks ago. We have our team from the Tampa, we call it POPS, our orthotics and prosthetics program in Tampa. That's a mouthful. And we went down to Panama and trained the licensed prosthetists at a university in Panama who are well skilled in orthotics and prosthetics, but we shared our technology. We shared our best practices. And so the way that program will work, right now we have over 300 Panamanian patients who had been coming to the US just for replacement orthotics and prosthesis. They're now able to get those in Panama. They'll visit with the professionals at the university who will electronically send us the detailed information we need to fabricate the devices. We'll make them in Tampa. We will ship them down to Panama, and then the team there will fit them to the patients. And if they need adjustments or anything along the way, they're able to go back to Udelis to do that. And that is huge. 300 patients who no longer need to get on a plane and leave home for weeks on end to get what they need. And then El Salvador. El Salvador is super exciting. We recently started doing surgeries in El Salvador. We have about a 3-year-old collaboration agreement with the Ministry of Health in El Salvador. And we have a story. The girl to your right is Gabby. We have a quick story we're going to share with you. But I wanted to show the 2 girls on the left. The girl sitting in the chair, her name is Virginia. She was our first pediatric spine surgery patient in El Salvador last October. And she came to the hospital to visit Gabby after her surgery in March to basically tell her everything's going to be okay. I know you're in pain today, but in 2 weeks, you're going to be amazed at what you can do. And then the middle picture is Nurse Hope from Greenville, who traveled with us. And Hope has been the bedside nurse for all of these patients. And I have to tell you, when we introduce Hope to the families and we tell them her name is Hope, everybody's eyes filled with tears, and they can't believe that we brought a nurse with us named Hope. So here's Gabby's story.
My name is Wendy Esmeralda Alberto de Ortiz, and my daughter's name is Gabriela Alejandra Ortiz Alberto. She is 13 years old. They discovered her scoliosis when she was 9 years old. Her scoliosis caused her to become sick, and she was admitted to the hospital. At Benjamin Bloom Hospital, the doctors followed up and told me that she was going to suffer from pain. They told us that her body was deformed and that nothing more could be done to help her because the surgery she needed was not practiced in El Salvador. At our next checkup with her doctor at Benjamin Blue, he introduced us to Shriners Children's. Together with a team brought in for surgery, on the day of the surgery, they talked to me. They told me what they were going to do, that there was not going to be any problem. I accepted everything from that moment. After surgery, the surgeon let me know everything that had been done. That there were no complications, that my daughter had done very well during the operation. The nurse they brought, Nurse Hope, gave me the training to be able to care for my daughter so that I could lift her, sit her down, turn her over, and help her walk so that her recovery would be quick. And that's how it was. She has recovered very well. She has not suffered from pain. She has mobilized on her own quite quickly. 3 days after her surgery, she could get up, go to bed, and move around the house on her own. And she could do all this without having pain.
Is to tell us how grateful she is and how happy Gabby is. And Gabby herself will message to just say thank you. You know, I was in pain for so many years and I never thought I would feel comfortable again. So it's just a wonderful thing that we're able to do.
So Laura, we couldn't do anything that we do without the great partnership that we have with Shriners,
Right.
with the members of the fraternity and all of their family members and friends who helped make this effort such a great success. We also have Shriners, of course, in Europe and in the Middle East, and we have been treating patients from there for a number of years, but we're looking at expanding programs there. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in that part of the world across the Atlantic?
Sure. That part of the world is very important to us here at Shriners Children's. We've had a 40-plus year relationship with a foundation in Cyprus. For those of you who are not familiar with that part of the world, Cyprus is the bottom star, very, very, right in the middle of the Mediterranean, very close to Lebanon. It's about a 20-minute flight from Lebanon. And again, we've had this very long collaboration, including outreach. And Cyprus is actually our third largest country of the number of patients who've come to us historically, at least over the last 11 years. And you can see the table over there. And in that region, Cypriot patients are by far the largest group of patients we have. We've been going on outreach for years. We had to pause that due to COVID, as you might imagine. We restarted that in January, and we were able to see about 150 children over a week. And they were all spine and orthopedic patients that we saw. And we were very lucky. The Cypriot government is super welcoming of us and very interested in having us use our Cyprus relationships as a regional hub. And so we were able to bring patients in from Egypt, Greece, Jordan, Lebanon, Romania, and Turkey. And that doesn't sound that hard, but when you look at patients who don't have passports, they don't have visas, They don't have the finances to travel. They don't have the finances for housing. We're very lucky that the foundation, they're partners with us to make this all possible, and the government makes themselves very accessible and very helpful. We're very excited because we're starting surgery in Cyprus in about a month, at the end of October. A spine surgeon and a pediatric orthopedic surgeon will be traveling with us, and we will be performing 3 surgeries in Cyprus. One is a pediatric spine surgery. Similar to El Salvador, Cyprus does not have a pediatric spine surgeon in the whole country. While Cyprus is a member of the European Union and has a very well-developed infrastructure, very small population. And when you have a small population, you don't have enough demand for these super subspecialists, such as our spine surgeon. So we'll be bringing that surgery there. We have multiple doctors from around Cyprus coming to observe that surgery and learn. And then we will also be performing 2 lower extremity surgeries. We'll be providing orthotics for those patients as well, teaming up with a local orthotics provider. And we're very, very excited about it, just to be able to bring even more care to the patients of Cyprus and of the region. And we will be, we have scheduled patients from surrounding countries as well. And I'm going to show you a couple, 2 little stories, little clips about patients who we saw at that outreach that were great. I did want to talk real quickly about Ukraine. We have a formal burns collaboration with Ukraine, and you can see Ukraine is also a very large country of origin for our patients. I wanted to show you a picture of a little girl that we brought over right after the war started. She had been burned, and we were very lucky. Again, imagine the cost of an air ambulance. We were able to put 2 burn children on the same air ambulance to economize. And this is a picture of her on her way over. They had given her a little stuffed animal, and they did great. They were also, they went to Boston. They were in our Boston hospital at the same time. And the moms were able to lean on each other a little bit, and it worked out very well. Our collaboration is with the hospital that this little girl came from, and we'll be sharing our best practices, both in infrastructure, equipment, as well as clinical protocols and practices, and we'll be hosting nurses and doctors and other professionals in observerships so that we can build that relationship for that. Here's a great story. So Anathasios is a patient of ours from Cyprus, and you can see him in 2013 when he was 5 years old, and he had his lower legs amputated. That's him receiving his first pair of prosthesis. 10 years later, in 2023, he comes back as a man. He's only 15, but he came back, and he got his prosthetics adjusted, and he also got fitted for new ones. Because of COVID, we hadn't been for 4 years. So you can imagine how much he grew from age 11 to age 15. And when he came in, he was very short because his prosthesis were for that of an 11-year-old boy. And now they're those for a 15-year-old man boy. So it was just a wonderful experience. And he was so happy. And as you can see, Brock, our prosthetist, he also knows, and he's seen him every year. So it was just a nice little reunion. This is Maria. She came over from Lebanon to the outreach clinic, and she was missing part of one leg, her lower leg. She'd never walked before. She did a very creative crab crawl, and she was terrified. And so for 3 days, her parents brought her to clinic with the Shriners from Lebanon, who brought her over and accompanied her, and they translated for us. And she wouldn't let anybody cast her. She didn't even want to hear about it. She kept saying, no, no, no. Finally, on the 3rd day, she let us fit her for a prosthesis. Brock went back about 3 months later with it, and then I would love to show you a little video of her 2 minutes after she gets the prosthetic and she's moving around.
Look at you! Doing great?
So Laura, we literally just saw a little girl take her first steps there, correct?
Absolutely. That was about 2 minutes after getting her prosthesis on, and she had never walked before. And
That's
so
just
with no
incredible.
therapy, she'll go back to Lebanon and she'll get the therapy that she needs to make sure she's walking properly. But we saw her take her first steps, and you saw the picture that she was in. That's the clinic the foundation provides to us to work out of. It's wonderful. And those were the foundation members who were there crying, videoing, crying. Everybody was so happy.
That it's just incredible to be able to see children receive the care from us, and that was overseas. Obviously, we have those kind of stories happen every day here in the United States as well. When we think about, Laura, how people can help, who are maybe watching from home or their offices or whatever the case may be, we get many referrals from many variety of sources. Our fraternal members, the Shriners,
Yeah.
they are not only involved in helping get the children there, they're also involved in referring the children to us. How can people help us? Where can they go to find more information?
Perfect. So we have a quick slide here that shows you what our website looks like. If you go to shrinerschildrens.org, this is the front page that you will see. And we have two circles. One is to request appointment, and the other one is to refer a patient. So that is probably the easiest way for people to refer a patient. They can do it 24/7, anytime they think of it, but they can also call. If you're in the US or Canada, we have a 1-800 number. From Mexico, that is also a toll-free number. And then you can use the 813 number if you're calling from somewhere else. And we work closely with Shriners from all over the world. I'm not even going to say every day, I would say every minute of every day. And then also with others who refer patients, and then family members. Parents, you saw little Carolina, she was referred by a woman that they had met in a shelter in Poland, right? So there's just a lot of ways that we can help. And this is the easiest, but if people prefer to call, we answer the phone 24/7.
It reminds me of the old saying that it takes a village, and for us,
Yep.
it really takes a global village.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So that's a nice segue actually into our first question.
Okay.
We're at the end of our formal program, and then a number of you have asked questions through the chat feature. If more of you wish to ask questions, please do so. The first question is a nice segue from what we just talked about, because one of the tenets of this organization, of course, is that we don't refuse a child based upon their ability to pay or their insurance status or any other means of that. Adam asked the question, however, how do you decide if a child receives support and care?
So the first thing we do is we screen, and I say we, our clinical professionals screen, that would not be me. They look at a patient's condition and they determine what the child needs within the scope that we can provide. As you know, we are a highly specialized organization, healthcare organization. I showed you the pie a little bit earlier about sort of the 4 types of care we provide: spinal cord injury, pediatric orthopedics, which also includes spine, burns, and craniofacial. Outside of that scope, we don't have those specialists in our system. So the first part of the process is to evaluate the case clinically to make sure that we can help. Once we determine that a patient does fit what we can, has a condition that we can help them with, we will find a way to get them to the United States or Canada or Mexico, or we will see them in outreach. And we will work with sponsors. We get sponsors for every single child's non-medical expenses. The cost of the health care is provided through Shriners Hospitals for Children organization. The cost of the non-medical expenses come from donations, from sponsors willing to help the kids get to where they need to go to get the care they need, and then to get back home.
Well, and of course, on that one page that you saw, the website page, there's a donate button there, and so if you wish to help us, there's a way actually on our donation pages where you can designate your gift for the international programs, and those funds will go directly to support the kind of care that you're seeing today. So along similar lines, and going back to the young man that we treated in Cyprus, Diane asks, when a child travels for a prosthesis and then needs adjustments and needs to, as we saw in that young man who grew from age 5 to age 15, how do those adjustments occur, and then how do we make sure that that child gets the prosthetic device that they need later in life?
That's a great question. So part of our global expansion is to identify collaboration partners in our key markets. So right now, if we don't have a collaboration partner, that child will come back to the US or come back to Mexico or come back to Canada to get the updated devices, orthotics or prosthesis they need, or to make repairs. You see what we just launched in Panama. So now the patients in Panama will be able to stay in the country. A lot of these devices have straps that hold them on tightly. They're Velcro. Velcro wears out. In the past, the child would either come back to us or the parent would cobble some kind of solution together until they could see us again in outreach or come back. Now in Panama, the kids can stay in Panama and they can contact the university. In the picture of Maria, when she's dancing around, crouched on the ground was a local prosthetist whom we work with, and he can provide those small fixes, and hopefully we'll be able to work out something with him later on. But we're really working to build a presence around the world in key markets so that the kids can get taken care of where they are.
Fantastic.
Sure.
Heidi, I guess from Canada, asked the question, what does the dot in British Columbia? We have 2 dots there. What are
Right.
those dots, and then what kind of treatment are we providing in British Columbia?
Perfect. So right now our presence in British Columbia is through telehealth. Right? So as you know, Heidi, if you're from Canada, you know each province has very specific healthcare laws, and the provincial health authorities have built amazing infrastructures. Due to COVID, obviously a lot of the surgical activity in the country slowed down everywhere around the world. So due to COVID, there were a lot of kids who maybe hadn't been able to get the care in 2020 or 2021 that they needed. So we're working with different healthcare organizations. The one closer to the US is Osoyos, so on the indigenous area, and that's telehealth. And then also the other one in Vancouver that we're right now working through telehealth, and then sharing best practices across everything that we do with the hospital over in Quebec.
So the next question, somebody didn't follow the directions very closely because I don't know the name of this person who asked the question. However, the question is a little difficult because our referrals come from a variety of sources.
Yes.
But if you could estimate, Laura, what percentage of our referrals actually come from pediatric physicians as opposed to other sources?
That's a great question. For the United States and Canada, I would say it's the majority of referrals for American and Canadian kids or children resident in those countries. For international, probably looking for an exact number, I would say very few. And that's not a good answer. The foundation in Cyprus has a pediatrician working with them, so obviously he evaluates the cases before they come to us. But and then Panama as well, our Shriners fraternal organization in Panama is very organized, and they have pediatricians working with them, and so they'll make sure that those kids are screened before. 20%, less than 20%, 5%, it's really hard to tell, but it's very small.
Well, as you said earlier, especially with our burn patients, so many of them actually come
Yes.
from an emergency situation,
Right.
an emergent situation, and therefore they're being referred by another care provider, but
Right.
not necessarily a pediatric
Usually
physician.
an ICU specialist. Usually it's an ICU specialist because most of these burn kids are in a pediatric ICU somewhere.
So Steve from Ohio asks about the documentation of that is required for the patients and their families to be able to travel from another country to the U.S. How do they get passports? How do they get visas? How do they get the appropriate documentation?
That is a great question. It's a challenge. So we do have patients reach out to us. Their families will reach out. They have passports, they have visas, they have family in the United States. Those families just sail through the process because obviously they're experienced in traveling and they've been here before. But the vast majority of our patients, and I will say 95% of our international patients, not the Canadians, but from non-Canada, don't have passports. Most have national ID cards, so they are identified by their governments. Again, some don't have birth certificates. So how do they get to us? In those cases, we work with foundations and the Shriners in country to help the families get the documentation they need to travel. well, to get the documentation they need to get a passport. We will help families. We have a lot of families being helped with foundations in parts of the world that are in war right now, Afghanistan in particular. And then other countries where it's very difficult for children to get care, and we work through foundations. To get their visas, if there is a local foundation or a shrine temple in country, they most of the time will help the patients. If not, we have a team of, we call them Global Patient Services Coordinators, who get on the U.S. Department of State or State Department or the Customs and Border Protection, and we apply for the visas for the patients. We apply for the visa applications, and we're building relationships with U.S. consulates and embassies around the world where we can hopefully get expedited appointments. Right now, most visa appointments are being scheduled for 2024 and 2025. And if you have a child with a curve in his or her spine and it's impeding their breathing, you can't wait 18 months to get a visa. So we've been very blessed to be able to build relationships with consular services people in most of our major countries. So we'll request an appointment through the website for the patient, and then we send an email. Hi, it's Laura. We have a patient who's asked for a visa, and they have an appointment for October 2024, and they'll email back, no problem, I moved it up to next week.
So Kevin asks us a pretty complex question, I would imagine. We have incredibly high standards here in the U.S. and in Canada in particular, and in Mexico, in terms of our partners,
Right.
who we work with. And we put those partners through a rigorous process.
Yep.
When we are looking at collaborating clinics and physicians,
Yep.
how do we evaluate those potential partners as referral sources to make sure that we are getting the kind of referrals that, first of all, we can treat those patients,
Right.
and then second of all, do they meet our standards? What kind of interview process do we go through?
This is Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. It's a great question. So we have, I'm going to take this in two parts. One is for referrals, right? We try to give feedback to referral sources if they refer patients to us and the kids don't have conditions we can care for. That helps with disappointment all around. It helps them not build up the hopes of the families, and also helps not frustrate that doctor who's referring to us saying, I referred 5 kids to you and you denied all of them, and why should I try? So we really try to go back and give feedback to that referral source. With regard to our collaboration partners and the partners we work with, say Mexico, we were talking about growing in Mexico. We have a very rigorous vetting process. Several of the hospitals we're working with are ranked in the top 10, 15, 20 hospitals in Mexico. They are or have been Joint Commission International accredited, meaning they meet the quality standards by Joint Commission. They're accredited by other international accrediting bodies. As far as the physicians, so across Mexico, most of the docs we work with who come into our clinic as providers have gone through the Pediatric Fellowship Program, co-sponsored or co-owned by Shriners Hospitals for Children Mexico and UNAM, which is one of the best universities in Mexico. And so they've already been vetted. They finished the fellowship program. They not only have the clinical skills, but they have the heart, they have the culture, they have the warmth that we bring to the patients. And so we vet them very carefully, and I'm using the word we. Our physician leaders vet them. They vet them in terms of clinical capability and then also in terms of culture.
Well, you actually bring up something that a lot of folks don't appreciate about Shriners, and that is our mission to education.
Yes.
Meaning that many physicians that are trained in pediatric orthopedics or burn care in the United States, or even plastic surgery, are really trained within our hospitals and within our locations. Yep. And so in the US as well, we actually have those relationships like the ones you're describing in Mexico, where we already know those physicians and we know that they've been trained by us, so therefore we can count on them to provide really competent and high-level referrals to us so that they know the types of patients that we treat.
And we have that in Mexico, and we have that in Canada, right? Because we have amazing fellowship programs in Canada, and some of the dots you saw on the map in Canada are for new joint fellowship programs. so that we can grow even more and share even more. And part of our outreach that we do, education's always involved.
So Bob asks us a question that I'll actually take,
Okay.
because it's an easy one, and that is, how many hospitals does the U.S. have, and how many Shriners hospitals are there in the U.S.? And we have 19 different locations in the U.S. that are freestanding locations. They're not necessarily all hospitals, however. They started as hospitals, but many of them have transitioned into either outpatient surgery centers or clinics. Because thank goodness, so many of the treatments that we provide today are on an outpatient basis, as opposed to being, when a child has to come and stay in one of our hospitals for days and weeks at a time. So we have 19 in the U.S. Final question is, recently there, of course, was the horrific earthquake in Morocco.
Yeah.
Have we received calls from Morocco, or do we expect to see referrals from Morocco? And maybe what does that kind of a process look like? Because we don't necessarily see those patients right away when they come out of an emergent situation like that.
Great question. We had experience from the recent earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. In Turkey, we actually have a fairly large Shriners fraternal presence. So the day after the earthquake, we reached out to the president of the club there and asked him, first of all, are you all okay? Second of all, we said, how can we help? Can you help us identify patients who might need care? And immediately said, yes, absolutely. So we, through our European Shriners, will reach out. We realized after Turkey, it's best to wait a couple weeks until things settle down and patients can be identified. And we'll probably most likely work through the European Shriners, the Emirate Shrine Temple, and the clubs to best identify the patients. Most injured patients from an earthquake have either a traumatic brain injury, which is not part of our scope of services, or they have amputations due to crush injuries. And with an amputation, you can't really fit the child for a prosthesis for months because the injured area has to heal. They have to build up scar tissue. So we're now, I believe we have 5 patients from Turkey here in the United States, which is months after the earthquake, but they were finally ready to travel and to come and be fitted and get the therapy they need.
So we're about to close. First of all, I want to say thank you to Laura for a wonderful conversation. I hope that all of you at home in your offices have enjoyed this and have learned something more about our international programs. We're going to close with a wonderful video, and that is of Juan Diego, who you saw earlier. Juan Diego, Laura talked about his journey to get to us, but we wanted to show you what Juan Diego's like today and then what his care was like through that entire process. Most of all, we want to thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed this webinar. Look for future webinars like this. And if you've been a supporter of Shriners, please, please accept our sincere thanks for the generous gifts you've made to our organization. Here's Juan Diego.
I'm Juan Diego. Welcome to Tegucigalpa, my hometown located in Honduras. This is a place where I was born and raised, just pretty much like any other normal kid.
Juan Diego siempre ha sido un niño bien amigable. De mis 2 hijos mayores, él siempre ha sido como bien tranquilo, con un carácter bien dulce.
My memories are of him being my best friend. Okay, I always wanted to play with him, okay, in my team and all that, and I will always defend him. And yes, because I'm the older brother, and I was very protective about him since little.
Bueno, el día del accidente fue un 31 de mayo del 2018. Fue aproximadamente entre 7:30 a 8 de la noche. Recibí la llamada de Jackie. Al contestar, ¿verdad? Pues ella se encontraba de una manera bien descontrolada, ¿verdad? Llorando y no entendía muy bien, pero así bien en general, ¿verdad? Que Juan Diego había tenido un accidente.
When I was 13, my mom decided to move to a new apartment, which was on a 3rd floor facing the street under construction. So since it was under construction, the apartment wasn't totally finished. There was a window without the glass facing the street at the same height of the light post with some high voltages wires in front of it.
En eso pues yo solo escucho como un sonido súper fuerte, como una explosión, y yo veo detrás de mí como un destello de luces, giro y en lo que yo lo veo a él completamente, que el cable lo atrajo a él y él en su defensa pues puso las manos. Mi reacción fue como, digo, Juan Diego, lo agarró de la cintura, me lo quería traer hacia mí, pero la carga eléctrica era muy fuerte, era como un imán, era imposible despegarlo.
Faster than blinking an eye, I just felt like all the charge, all the electricity literally going through my body. So it was so fast you don't have time to react to it. My heart starts rushing like really fast to the point that you feel that your heart is going to explode. And suddenly all the lights turn off and you just kind of feel like in this like lonely cave all by yourself, because I was able to hear my mother like scream, you know, because of her worry. So suddenly I just woke up like really scared, like because one of the neighbor was giving me CPR so I could react. I just saw like 5 people around me and they were like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" They gave me a cup of water and suddenly I was trying to stand up, but I couldn't. And obviously they didn't let me. So why I can stand up? And I just felt like as if I didn't have no arms because I wasn't able to move it. And that's when I realized and I looked around me and I just saw all of my hands, you know, burned.
Bueno, nos subimos al carro, él nos subió al carro y nos fuimos, pero de inmediato, pues, al primer hospital que estuviese cerca del lugar. Pues de inmediato lo sacan en camilla, lo meten en emergencia y a mí me dijeron, quédate aquí en el carro. Buscamos en Google hospitales para niños quemados y la primera opción que aparece fue Shriner. Para nosotros era un sueño. Los tíos de Juan Diego, porque en ese momento papá y mamá estaban completamente sumergidos a los cuidados de Juan Diego. Ellos se encargaron como encontrar la conexión en Honduras que nos pudiera traer a Boston, a donde es el hospital que lo atendió a él, que le abrió las puertas.
Shriners Hospital. Igual, ¿verdad? En aquella oscuridad, como que encontramos esa luz, ya, que es leve, que nos mirábamos y pues han sido una parte muy importante, ¿verdad? De este proceso tan difícil, porque aquí como que entró otra etapa, ¿verdad?
I remember going to my first appointment and they were just like really nice and careful with me, like taking my bandages off. They understand because at the time I haven't seen my hands. My parents just told me, you know, they have to make some amputations in your fingers, but I have never looked at my hands.
Con mucha ternura, me llenaba como de mucha como satisfacción como mamá, el ver que me lo trataban con tanto amor hasta el día de hoy. Yo siento que encontramos una familia en Shriner, Boston.
Juan Diego is like light in the darkness. Doesn't matter where he is, okay, he always shines. He always brings the best out of everyone, and that's why I think he's a great leader. There's this phrase that we say in our family that the biggest battles are given to God's biggest warriors, and well, that's the battle that was given to Juan Diego.